Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew Smith. I serve as Senior Vice President at Sudan Relief Fund, and I just want to say thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. We'll go ahead and get started here. This afternoon, my goal here is to walk us through about 30 to 45 minutes worth of photos and videos, delivering to you all an update on some of the great projects and initiatives that you, our donors, have been a part of. So I'll walk through some photos and videos of current projects, new projects, and then towards the end, I will also be able to answer a few questions that you all hopefully sent in. So I appreciate all the questions that we received. I'll try to get to a few of them at the end. So that's how we will structure some of this afternoon is some photos and videos, and then we'll move into some questions here. And I'll try to get everybody out of here by, around 5 o'clock. So thanks again for joining. For those of you who have just joined, again, my name is Matthew Smith, Senior Vice President at Sudan Relief Fund. Key part of my job is connecting our donors here in the U.S. with and internationally to the ground that is on the work in Sudan and South Sudan. And I'm trying to bridge that gap here. And so this report here today will hopefully bring you all a little bit closer to the work that's happening on the ground on the other side of the world in Sudan and South Sudan. So as we start here, I just, as always, I like to show a map because it provides a little bit of context for our conversation here this afternoon. As you can see here, the green dots are not an exhaustive list of the locations where Sudan Relief Fund is involved, but it will give you a good sense of some of the key project areas where we are primarily responsible for projects. So to start here, I want to take us to North Sudan. So hopefully you all can see my mouse here as I indicate uh, here in this area of Sudan called the Nuba Mountains. So this green dot here labeled Goodell is where the Mother of Mercy Hospital is, run by American missionary Dr. Tom Katina. Many of you might recognize that name. He's been a longstanding partner of Sudan Relief Funds and is really an incredible man, personal hero of mine, and he runs a mission hospital. Sudan Relief Fund is fortunate to provide the medicines at this hospital. But to set some context for what we are doing in Nuba right now, Sudan Relief Fund, is that Sudan has been mired in a civil conflict that is now on its third year. And it's I consider it to be the world's worst humanitarian crisis, and I think that's backed up by a lot of the metrics and numbers that we have seen coming out of this civil conflict, which includes tens of millions of people displaced. It includes humanitarian needs on a scale that is pretty much unimaginable. And as a result, the needs that are incredibly great, and Sudan Relief Fund has stepped in to try and help meet some of these needs, specifically here in the Nuba Mountains. So we've seen people arrive to Nuba who have been displaced from places like Khartoum, the capital of Sudan, where fighting has really been pretty brutal. We've seen people come to Nuba from Darfur, the western part of Sudan, where there's been reports of ethnic cleansing. And so they arrive to Nuba with nothing really. They just know that there's maybe an American missionary doctor in that part of Sudan, and maybe it might be a little bit more remote and safe than where they were previous. And so it's into this context that Sudan Relief Fund has stepped in with a couple of new initiatives. I mentioned that we partner with Dr. Katina to provide the medicines at his hospital. But even more than that, this year, we've been fortunate enough to undertake some new projects as well. So one project is that we are planning to embark on here in the coming months is the construction of 15 new hand pump water wells, as well as the repair of 15 existing water wells that have maybe gone bad or they need certain parts or need to be repaired in some manner. And so I'm very excited to share with you all that over the coming 6 to 12 months, we'll be engaged in this project to provide clean water in the form of 30 new water wells, 15 completely brand new that we'll drill, and then 15 repaired wells. And this will provide water to not just the existing Nuba population who have great needs, but also all of these displaced people, close, well over 1 million now at this point of displaced people that have arrived to Nuba as well. And they'll also be the beneficiaries of these clean water projects. So I'm very excited about that. And as this proceeds, of course, we will continue to keep you, our donors, informed and engaged on this particular project. In addition to that, we've also been involved in the purchase and distribution of what is known as a ready-to-use therapeutic food, otherwise known as as Plumpy Nut, which is the kind of brand name for this particular product. As you can imagine, Sudan with this massive displacement crisis has seen, the needs of the basic humanitarian needs of millions of people drastically increase over the course of the last couple of years. And many of our partners, such as Dr. Tom, have been ringing the alarm bells saying, we've been seeing camps, massive camps of people in need, and we don't really have the resources to provide food, shelter, water for them. And so that's the context that we're stepping in and saying, okay, we'll be able to purchase, ship, and deliver what's known as Plumpy Nut here. Now you can see from the packaging what it's used for. For children who are over 6 months old with severe acute malnutrition, if they are basically on death's door because of malnutrition, this is a food that will essentially jumpstart them and bring them back to life. It's really a miraculous food here. It is peanut based. It's very calorically dense. It is doesn't need to be stored in certain temperatures or anything like that. And so it can be taken without water. And it's very easy for the little ones to eat themselves, actually, because as you can see from the packaging, even you just basically have to knead it and then you tear it, squeeze it, and eat it. My colleague David Detoni, Sudan Relief Fund's executive vice president, was recently in Nuba just earlier this year, and he had the opportunity to see this program in action. He had the opportunity to actually go to one of the displaced people's camps and actually see the distribution of this aid ongoing. So you can see this little guy, he's clearly doing a little bit better than he probably was when he first entered the program. He's got his Plumpy Nut there that he's eating. David actually took this photo. And how this works is these children are evaluated first by measuring the circumference of their arm. So this little guy, as you can see, is pretty malnourished. And so his arm is actually measured. And if it falls in the red in terms of the circumference in centimeters, that means that he's severely and acutely malnourished. And so he'll be put into the program and he'll receive Plumpy Nut, a couple of packets over the course of a week, and then will be reevaluated again after the period of a week. And this particular camp where this photo was taken is in western Jebel in the Nuba Mountains, which is an area that, for a large portion of time in the last 3 years was inaccessible to any aid organizations because of some fighting that was happening in this part of Sudan. And so, once the battle line shifted and the dust settled, people like Sudan Relief Fund and a few other partner organizations that we work with moved in and saw, my goodness, there's all of these people who have been trapped essentially behind battle lines who have been receiving no aid, including, these poor children. And these are the recipients of this Plumpy Nut that you all, our donors, have been generously providing to help meet this need. Here's another little guy who, again, his arm is in the red, but then hopefully after about 2 weeks, he'll be able to, he'll be in the yellow, and then hopefully just shortly thereafter that, it'll be in the green. It works pretty quickly. And I actually have a short video. Now, I hope you'll bear with me. I hope the technology will actually allow me to show this, but it's just a 3-minute video of my colleague David on his recent trip to Nuba. And he had the opportunity, as I mentioned, to visit this camp. And I want to show you just a short clip of him at the camp itself.
Hi, this is Dave Detoni and with Sudan Relief Fund, and I'm here in the Nuba Mountains at one of the feeding programs, and I wanted to say a special thank you for your generous gift to help feed these severely malnourished kids that you can see behind me. Thank you. Where we are basically it's a testing facility to see if these young toddlers can keep food down. They've been severely malnourished, or they are severely malnourished. And one of the big tests is just to see if they could keep food down. But what they're eating here, and I'm not going to take it from her, is plumpy nut. And this is what Sudan Relief Fund has been able to help in a large contribution. And so this is going to save lives like these little girls here.
My name is Elias Kunar Shangero.
So you do screening for malnourishment cases?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when we get children who are malnourished, for instance, like this is the tape we use, mock tape. This is the mock tape we use.
Okay.
When a child falls under this red mark,
Yes.
this one we put in the program.
Okay.
That is OTP. We put in the program, and the child is given RUTF. This is the hump. You are going to take the measurement.
Yep.
So you adjust it. Don't make it too tight and don't make it too loose. You see this child follows under yellow.
He's under yellow.
Yeah, he's under yellow. Okay, this child, he has been in the program for at least 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
So when Mustafa was first here, he was probably in the red.
Yeah.
You probably have this recorded. So he was probably 10 or 11.
10.
And so this is the plumpy nut here?
Yeah, this is a plumpy sub.
Plumpy supplemental.
Yeah, this is plumpy sub for moderate.
And so in about 2 weeks' time, he's moved from the red here
Yeah.
to the almost green.
Yeah.
So the plumpy nut is literally, and it's one of the only things they can keep down, right? That they can only stomach, and it's a high density of nutrients, specifically for children,
For
right?
children, yes.
So this is the plumpy sup here.
Every visit they get 14 sachets.
14 of these for like one a day, two a day,
One in a day.
one in a day.
One in a day.
And do they eat anything else, or do they just eat this until they're better?
They also eat other food and household.
Okay. And then once their arm gets into
Well,
the green zone, then they stop this
it is.
and they eat normal food.
Yes.
Okay. So this is really jump starting these babies, these toddlers back to life.
Yes.
Over 200,000 have come through this camp the past several months, and probably 50,000 of those, it's a rough estimate, have been starving. And so you're saving lives, and through this really cool, funny named product called Plumpy Nut. And so this Plumpy Nut is the frontline treatment. This problem's not going to go away. There'll be more refugees coming from Sudan, and the challenge now is trying to get as much actual food into this camp and here as possible. So thank you.
So as David shared in that video, you've got almost 1 million people who have arrived to the Nuba Mountains, that area where you saw in that video. And the needs are pretty drastic between the needs for food, for clean water, and for medicine. And so we're Sudan Relief Fund has been involved in all three areas now and plans to be moving forward. The stories that you hear from Nuba are pretty remarkable. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, you've got people coming from Darfur and from Khartoum, and each one of those stories of displacement, I think you could probably make a movie about or write a book about. There was one story that I recently heard of a young woman, who had 5 kids, and her husband died, and when in the initial fighting in Khartoum, and so she and her 5 kids had to flee to a refugee camp, and then the refugee camp was bombed by the government militia, and then from there they had to flee further down into Nuba, and then they've arrived, basically at Dr. Tom Katina's doorstep there in the Nuba Mountains. So, the needs are pretty drastic, and for every family, they all have a story of hardship and loss. And so it's our privilege, Sudan Relief Fund, with your partnership, to be able to step in and help meet those needs. And now what you're seeing in this photo is just a warehouse, but it's full of life-saving medicines. So I think it's pretty cool, to see boxes and boxes of medicines that your partnership through Sudan Relief Fund is helping provide. This is in Juba, South Sudan, and these medicines are staged here, and then they are flown up to the border and then trucked up to the hospital itself. And this is actually, once you actually get into Nuba, this is a facility where the boxes of medicine are received, and then they are distributed both to the hospital, but then also to the surrounding clinics where Sudan Relief Fund also supports. This is at the hospital itself. You can see here a little one. You might recognize that package from the video and photos I've just previously shown. This little one is actually having some plumpy nut there as well at the hospital in the children's ward. Here's Dr. Tom Katina. This is actually a recent update from him is that he and his wife Nasima recently adopted another young boy. So this is Vincent Moses Katina. He is 1 year old. He's just learning to walk. And I haven't met Vincent yet, but I hope to see him and meet him when I travel to Nuba in October, hopefully. And this is Tom, Nasima, his wife, their new 1 year old Vincent, and their other son, Francis. And then, of course, you just have, again, photos around the hospital, each representing an individual, a life who has been impacted through no fault of their own by war, by tragedy. But the people in Nuba remain some of, if not the most resilient people that I have ever had the privilege to meet and to work alongside. And I have so much respect and admiration for the Nuba people who have experienced so much loss and hardship, and yet you see, even in the midst of that, like this woman, you've got smiles. So I spent the first here maybe 15 minutes talking about some of the projects that we're undertaking here in the Nuba Mountains of Sudan. So I mentioned those clean water projects. I mentioned the plumpy nut deliveries, some of the medicines that we continue to deliver up to the hospital. And now I want to take us into South Sudan. So you can see here all the green dots in South Sudan where SRF is involved in projects. And I want to take us there, and I'll walk through some various projects, both existing and some new initiatives we're going to be engaged in over the coming year. But before I do that, I do actually just want to set some context as well for South Sudan. South Sudan, the newest country in the world, the poorest country in the world by GDP per capita, and it has incredible humanitarian needs itself. It's also received an influx of refugees coming from Sudan, and you have to think that the desperation is pretty significant for people who, if they're choosing to come to South Sudan, which is the poorest country in the world, the war in North Sudan must be pretty bad if that's the case, which certainly is. This provides just a little bit of a humanitarian snapshot so you can see the numbers of people that are in need. And these numbers are almost like impossible to comprehend, in my opinion. I mean, they're just so significant and so vast that they're almost impossible to comprehend. And I want to, through the photos, hopefully put some names and faces to these numbers. But at least to start, you can see there's about 9.3 million people in South Sudan that are in need. 7.7 are food insecure, and that's for a population of just under 13 million people. So you think like well over, half are acutely food insecure, over half don't have access to clean water. Basically, nearly all of the population is in need in some form or fashion. And you layer on top of that things like cholera, which has recently seen an uptick in South Sudan, an influx of refugees and displaced people, the maternal mortality rate being extremely high. You layer all of these things on top of one another, and it creates just like a perfect storm of humanitarian crises. And now that is the situation where Sudan Relief Fund and our partners step in to try to make an impact. And you see things all across South Sudan like this, these IDP camps, displaced peoples who are South Sudanese but have been displaced from their local homes or communities. This photo was taken by David Detoni, who you just saw recently in that video. David took this photo on his recent trips just a month or two ago into South Sudan. And in Tambra, which is Western Equatoria, South Sudan, there's been an uptick in tribal violence. And the resulting displacement has led to about 20,000 people being displaced from their homes. And even in these camps, they are not necessarily safe. In fact, the day before David arrived to this region of South Sudan, a priest had been murdered, and there had been an attack on IDPs in the camp itself. So even after they've been displaced from their homes and have been moved into a camp, there are fears for their safety. This crisis, as I mentioned, has led to in this just this region of South Sudan about 20,000 people being displaced, and Sudan Relief Fund has partnerships with the Catholic Church in this particular part of South Sudan and has stepped in to provide basic food items and help alleviate some of the humanitarian concerns for this population. I've seen it myself, and during my travels in South Sudan, I've seen a number of these types of camps, and it's really a cycle of displacement for so many, where they are living in their home where they're from, then they are pushed out because of tribal violence for no particular rhyme or reason, whether it might be over resources or cattle or it's just random. They're pushed out of their homes, and then they settle in an IDP camp. After a while, they return home, only then shortly thereafter to have it happen all over again. And I hear that story time and again from so many people. And so, as you can imagine, with the displacement of so many people, with the humanitarian concerns being what they are, even just from that graph I showed a bit ago, the staggering amounts of people that are in need, I wanted to also just quickly hone in on clean water specifically. This graph shows you a bit about the volume of people who are in need of basic drinking water and sanitation facilities. These bar graphs all represent different South Sudan states. So, there's the overall population here at the top of the graph, but then each of these names is a different South Sudan state. So the majority of them, about 50 to 60%, do not have access to basic drinking water. And even fewer percentage have any sort of improved sanitation or latrines at all, any sort of sanitation facilities. And then an even fewer number have any access to soap or water for hand washing. So Sudan Relief Fund has stepped in this year in a large part of making clean water and the construction of water wells a significant part of our program portfolio. With so many donor partnerships, we've been able to construct already this year a number of wells, and we have many more planned for the remainder of this year. And with numbers like this, you can certainly see that the needs are significant. This is one recent well that we completed in Western Equatoria, South Sudan. You can see my colleague David kind of out of frame there with his sunglasses on, but he had the opportunity to visit this well, which is one of 5 that was constructed in key villages where there was lack of clean water. Now, you may ask, like, how do we know where to build these wells to make the most impact? Really, we are relying on our contacts and partnerships and relationships that we have built over a couple of decades in South Sudan. So, for example, this project is done in Western South Sudan, and there is a Spanish priest and a German priest that we have long-standing relationships with, and we have a trust in them that they are able, because they are on the ground there, to identify and pinpoint exactly where these water wells need to be placed for the maximum amount of people to be impacted. So this was one of 5 hand pump wells that we constructed in this area of Western Equatoria. I have a short video here as well, just from David's recent travels that I'll share with you when he had the chance to visit one of these wells. We actually employed a local South Sudanese photographer to help take some video here, so hopefully you enjoy his work as well.
So we are in Mzungu, Western Equatoria, and South Sudan. And this here is one of the wells that we have drilled through the generous gifts of our donors.
Tapa Proni Abro Sudan Relief Fund.
Beautiful faces here of Sudan Relief Fund that are helping us in several projects, and they have the audacity and the gentleness to come to visit us.
You saw there at the end, actually, one of the priests that I mentioned, Father Albert, who's a longstanding partner of ours, who, again, is helping us identify and drill in locations where there's the greatest need. So this was another just beautiful photo of all the kids rushing in to get their hands on some of this clean water. And so many of these children, whether it's the young girls or the women, like they're the ones often who are responsible for going and fetching this water, wherever it might be, putting their physical safety at risk. So to have a new well in their village, in their community, is life-changing for so many. And this was, again, just one of 5, but we've got hand pump wells that are spread out all across South Sudan this year that we're constructing. This was another one. So this was not the well you just saw in the photos, but a different one of those 5. And there's David and Father Albert surveying the well and the quality of the water. This is the kids pumping the water, just so excited, playing in it. It's just a beautiful thing. This is actually a group of nuns that have recently come out to South Sudan. They are actually helping with the education in this particular area of Western Equatoria. They're going to be teaching at a school, and we have the opportunity to meet them and partner with them. And they were actually present there for one of the openings of the wells, which was really nice. And this is another hand pump in Bentiu, South Sudan, which is near the northern border, actually kind of close to Sudan and South Sudan. So I got this photo recently from our team showing the construction of a hand pump well. This is one of a number of wells that we're doing in Bentiu, South Sudan. It's probably, I got this photo maybe a few weeks ago, so it should actually be close to, if not already completely done and in operation. This is a water tower in Wau, South Sudan that we have recently constructed. This is one of 2 submersible wells that we've drilled in Wau, South Sudan. This one was we've got one that's going in near a leper colony, and then we have one that's going in near a secondary school in Wau, South Sudan, which is kind of right near closer to the center of the country. And as you see, this is different than the hand pump. This is water is pumped into the tank that sits above ground and then is actually controlled by solar. It pumps the water up as the tank starts to at the water level in the tank starts to go down, and then it's actually controlled by a spigot on the other end for people to utilize, so they don't have to necessarily even pump the water. So I just walked us through that was a number of wells in South Sudan, and we'll end up hitting probably closer to 50 total wells this year across all the different regions that I've talked about, which is just really exciting for us to play a small part in bringing clean water and the gift of clean water to so many. In addition, we're also involved, and I want to share a couple of projects in the educational space as well. As you can see from this graph here, South Sudan has one of the lowest literacy rates in the world, with only a third of people being able to read and millions of children out of school. This is a new school in Ave Maria Parish, the Don Bosco school that we've been supporting now for a couple of years as it's been getting off the ground and going. It's just a great facility overseen by Father Avellino and Father Albert, the priest who was just in that water well video just a little bit ago. This is Bishop Abengite School in Yambio, where we have, within the last year, constructed a water well, and we also continue to support operations here at this particular school. This is a secondary school and considered one of the best secondary schools in the region. And in addition, this is another new secondary school in Western Equatoria, run by the Brothers of Christian Instruction, a group of Ugandan brothers who came out with basically nothing and started the school from scratch And they've started a primary school first, and now they've also started a secondary school too. And we are so thankful that SRF can play a role in supporting this school. We have recently constructed a multi-purpose hall at this school. We're in the process of constructing a new dormitories as well as new classrooms for the secondary school. So there's over 1,000 students and at this school now between the primary and the secondary, and many students actually board at this school as well. And it's considered so good too that even some of the tribal chiefs from around the area send their children to this school. Because the quality of education that they're getting from the brothers here is very good, and it's considered, like Bishop Abangite School, to be some of the best in Western Equatoria. We're very thankful to work with the Ugandan brothers here, the Brothers of Christian Instruction. This is one of the new buildings at the school that you can see going up. We also recently purchased a vehicle for the brothers out there as well. That's actually here on the left. Achilles is his name, which is a pretty cool name. And so he is being handed the keys by Sudan Relief Fund staff and our program coordinator, Frederick Atino. I think this is the first time you've seen him in this presentation, but Fred is a key part of our work on the ground in South Sudan, and you can see him there on the right. And we've also recently purchased a tractor for the school as well. This particular area in Western South Sudan is the soil can be worked and things can be grown pretty easily. And so Achilles requested a tractor. They have a lot of land out there. So we recently purchased a tractor, and that will be sent pretty soon to them so that so that they'll be able to not just teach, but also be able to hopefully do some vocational training as well, which is a key part of what we do too, is not just giving a fish, but teaching how to fish. This is the multi-purpose hall as well. And then lastly here, as we actually, I have two more projects I just want to quickly touch on. So not quite lastly, but I will take us here to Nzara, which is where the St. Teresa Mission Hospital is, where this is one of the two mission hospitals where Sudan Relief Fund is involved in. We have Mother of Mercy Hospital, which I talked about just at the beginning with Dr. Tom. And we also have St. Teresa Hospital in Nzara, South Sudan. And we are growing our presence here at this particular hospital. We've got a number of really exciting projects that are happening both this year and planned for the future. We have made investments in the Safe Motherhood Project, specifically for the care of mothers and as they are pregnant, and then after they've had their child as well, caring for them, because South Sudan is the highest maternal mortality rate in the world. So there's a significant need for care for mothers, pregnant mothers, as well as mothers and their babies after they're born. This on the right is Dr. David Loro. He's standing there with Dave Titoni. And Dr. David Loro is an orthopedic surgeon. And for the first time ever, St. Teresa Hospital and Western Equatoria has an orthopedic surgeon who's been out there for monthly. He's been there for about a week to a week and a half every month over the last year, and plans to continue in the future, providing orthopedic care for those at the hospital. This is something that didn't exist previous, and David Loro is making just an incredible impact. He's a good man. I've had the chance to meet him myself. Really smart physician, and is helping save lives. Basic things like bone fractures or skin lesions or dog bites, like basic things that here in the US or in the developed world would be fairly easy to treat and to recover from. Those can often be death sentences in a place like South Sudan, where things can get infected quickly or never heal properly. And so David Loro is really making an incredible impact, and we're very fortunate to have supported him over the last year and plan to continue moving forward. This is actually David doing surgery as well. You can see him there on the right in his glasses. I'm also excited to share that Sudan Relief Fund, with the generous support of a group of donors in Australia, is going to be unveiling and opening a new pediatric ward within the next 2 months. We have plans to open this new pediatric ward at St. Teresa Hospital at the beginning of August. And if all is on schedule, that's when we'll open it. And we're just thrilled at the good that this will do in providing care for the little babies in Western Equatoria who otherwise, care is really challenging for them. In addition to the pediatric ward, once that is completed, we also are setting our sights on the construction of a new NICU ward for preemie babies as well. So it's a part of our vision to really build up this hospital to be fully functioning in every capacity from the moment that a mother is pregnant with the baby to the young age, whether it's the NICU unit, the pediatric ward, if they break a bone when they're, a young toddler or a young child, David Laura's there to help fix it and repair those bones. And then moving forward, there's comprehensive care in any capacity, right? So it's all part of our vision to really build up this hospital to make it fully functioning in every capacity. And this is actually inside the construction of the new pediatric ward as well. And lastly, I want to take us out to some of the work that we're doing at two different orphanages. So this is the St. Bakita Orphanage in Zara, South Sudan as well. This is actually just a stone's throw away from the hospital that I just walked us through. And St. Bakita Orphanage is run by a group of nuns called the Blue Sisters. And there's about over 200 children at the orphanage. This was an orphanage that we recently helped build new buildings for. In fact, we've got new dormitories, we've got new staff quarters, latrines, as well as water wells too. We built this facility for orphans, for about 150 orphan children who were staying at this orphanage. However, with the recent war in Sudan to the north having been raging now for a number of years, there's been actually an influx of children even arriving to this orphanage. So now Sister Bianca B, who runs the orphanage, is the lead nun at this orphanage. There's now over 250 kids at this orphanage. So we've actually had to kind of readjust some of our plans so that we can further build out the capacity at this orphanage to account for this influx of children. And so here you can see some of the facilities. Some of the groundskeeping is not quite done, but the buildings themselves have been completed. They're really, really remarkable buildings. I had the chance to see them in construction when I was there last year, and I plan to visit, hopefully when everything is all done in October on my next visit out to South Sudan. And you can see some of the nuns here on the right, some of the children. Some of the children's faces I recognize. This little guy in the bottom right, I know I've seen him before when I was there last year. It's still in good health, which is always good to see. And then some of the volunteers and midwives who also help at the orphanage as well, who support the sisters. In addition, we also support the work of the Missionary Sisters of Charity, the order founded by Mother Teresa. They are incredible women. They are the poor, really serving the poor. They take a vow of poverty themselves and have no real earthly possessions, and they've dedicated their entire life and lives to caring for those who have been marginalized. And so we support them both at the orphanage that they help run in Rumbek, South Sudan, and then we also support their efforts to care for lepers at the Malo leper colony, which is about 45 minutes outside of Rumbek. And so this photo I got this photo maybe 3 or 4 months ago of the recent delivery of medicines that are going out to the leper colony in Malo. So they were very thankful to have these medicines. They loaded up their truck and they drive out to the leper colony to help hand out these basic medicines for the lepers. And then inside the orphanage, we recently had a multi-purpose hall go up, a totally new building. Then we are also helping with the dormitory renovations and roof renovations at the existing facility. And we also help provide for their general operating costs at the orphanage as well. And, like Dr. Tom, like so many of the other missionaries we work with, I mean, these sisters really are some of my heroes and represent just some of the most beautiful souls, I think, on earth. And they don't turn any babies away. They take them all. And it's actually the only orphanage in Rumbek that accepts babies, which is both a sad reality, but also I'm so thankful for the work of these sisters that they've stepped in to help provide care for these babies who, their mothers have either died in childbirth or they've been abandoned. and now they have loving care from these sisters. And your partnership and support through SRF enables us to continue to provide that care for these young ones. That's actually inside the new multi-purpose building that was recently constructed. So just remarkable work that these sisters are doing, and we're so thrilled to be able to partner with them on it. And so that takes us through. That certainly wasn't an exhaustive list of projects where Sudan Relief Fund is a part of this year and where your support and donations are going towards. But as we hit the midway point of the year, I at least wanted to provide an update on some of our larger initiatives, projects that we are currently involved in, or ones that we're going to be involved in the back half of this year. And so I appreciate you just taking some time this afternoon, um, and being engaged and involved in this work. Sudan and South Sudan, as I mentioned at the top, represent one of the greatest humanitarian crises that this world has ever seen. And so I appreciate your willingness to stay engaged in this work, to partner with us, and to continue to keep people in that part of the world in your prayers. So at this point, I'll leave my contact information actually here up on the screen just in case you have any further questions. And if I don't get to your question, if you did ask one when you signed up, I apologize. I'm trying to be respectful of y'all's time this afternoon. So I'm just going to take a couple of questions that people sent in. And if I don't get to yours, please reach out to me directly, call me, email me, and I'd be delighted to speak with you. And if you want any other updates moving forward on any of these projects or other projects that I've mentioned, again, feel free to reach out to me. We did get a number of great questions, and I'll just take a couple of them right now. I got a few questions from people about the current political situation in South Sudan. People asked for an update on that. My short answer is that the political situation in South Sudan is quite complicated. It's very unstable right now. And in fact, I was intending on going to South Sudan for a pretty long trip just this past month, but I was unable to because of the unstableness of the current political situation, which has led to civil conflict, not at like a full-scale civil war in South Sudan necessarily, but certainly there has been an uptick in violence, and it was not secure enough for me to be able to get into the country at this time. David was able to, but I was not able to coordinate my travel in particular. Recently, the president of South Sudan, Salva Kiir, recently arrested the vice president for what he claims to be, coming up with some sort of conspiracy against him. Exactly why is not particularly clear to me, why he arrested the vice president, but I just, that has led to an unstable situation in South Sudan. And of course, the war to the north in North Sudan destabilizes everything around the region as well. So the current situation is complicated, but in the midst of that, I'm so proud and fortunate to say that Sudan Relief Fund's work has not been impacted really in the slightest due to this. So that is a positive still, in spite of the complicated and unstable political situation. I got another great question that said, how do you decide where to allocate funds? There's so many needs. We see all the needs in your communications, but how do you decide exactly where to send these funds? And I think that there's a couple of elements that go into that decision making. One is the partnerships that we've developed over time in Sudan and South Sudan. And it's also a matter of going on our, David being there on the ground, Frederick Tino, our program coordinator, being there on the ground, myself traveling there as well and seeing firsthand these needs. That gives us that insight into understanding, okay, here's where the greatest needs are. We're able to meet face to face with the missionaries in person and being able to dialogue with them about what their greatest needs are. And more than us coming in and saying, hey, here's what you need to do. Here's where we're going to, here's what you all, the missionaries, need to do. We rely on them telling us what the greatest needs are. And then we just try to support them. And that's really one of the primary ways that we decide how to allocate funds is developing long-standing relationships through the Catholic Church on the ground in South Sudan, and then being able to use those relationships to effectively understand or know where the greatest needs are. And then we can move funds in that direction. Another question kind of in the same vein was, how do you ensure SRF is getting to aid to the people who need it most? It's a great question, and I think really it comes down to three things. It comes down to vetting our partners who are on the ground, monitoring existing projects that we're involved in, and building new relationships. And I think that's the way by vetting our partners and knowing like, yeah, these are reliable people who are committed to this work, who are embedded here 365 days a year. You know, there's not a risk of them pulling out if things get too dangerous. We're going to partner with them. And then we monitor our existing projects. I travel to South Sudan. Our program staff travels around South Sudan, to make sure if a well was said to be built, did it get built? Is it meeting the needs of people? Is it still functional? And then we also, while we're there, we build new relationships so that we can identify where those needs, where maybe that aren't on our radar, where we could step in and be supportive. So it's through vetting our, and having longstanding partnerships. It's through monitoring our existing projects and then building these new relationships. And through a combination of those efforts, we're able to get aid, I think, to the people who really need it the most. And then I had a great question, and I'll probably end with this as we're just about at time here. It said, what are SRF's top priorities over the next 6 to 12 months? I touched on some of them in our time here this afternoon, but to summarize, I think first and foremost, our top priority over the next 6 to 12 months continues to be the delivery of direct aid. So, clean water, food aid, medicines, things that keep people alive and help them thrive, right? That is really our primary priority as we see it in the face of all of these great humanitarian needs. Now, with that, we also are prioritizing the some key capital projects, such as the construction of the pediatric ward, which I touched on. We're looking ahead to the construction of a new NICU unit at St. Teresa Hospital. We've helped construct new school buildings and things like that. And I think that is additionally where we are focused in the background too, is, our primary focus is on direct aid, but we also want to make key strategic investments into civil society. And that includes things like schools and educational projects to support the future of the country as well, to make sure that young people are getting educated so that, the future of this young country, South Sudan, has a future, with people who are of high moral character and who can lead this country into something that is not just civil conflict and violence. So our top priorities remain direct aid, but we are still, in addition, focused on some key capital projects, building out the infrastructure of some of the mission hospitals where we're involved in, supporting missionaries who are on the ground doing vocational training, supporting educational projects. And through that combination of those priorities, we are helping to meet those immediate needs, but then also start to lay the groundwork for a long-term successful future for this region as well. So I want to thank you again for being a part of this time this afternoon. Thank you so much for your continued and faithful interest in Sudan Relief Fund's work. And if you're new here, you somehow just stumbled into this and have even more questions now, again, please feel free to reach out to me. Would love to hear from you and answer any questions you may have. My email's there, and you can reach me there or by phone. I hope to do another one of these webinars with you all sometime later in the year. As I think I mentioned here during our time, that I plan to travel to South Sudan and the Nuba Mountains of Sudan in October. And my hope is that towards the end of this year, I'll be able to do another webinar with you all, updating you on some of the projects and initiatives that I see when I'm there on the ground as well. So be on the lookout in your email for that down the road. But in the meantime, thank you again. And I'll send you off just with our sincere appreciation and gratitude for your continued generosity and support. So with that, I hope you have a great evening. And if you're in an area in the United States that's experiencing a heat wave, stay cool. And God bless. Take care. Bye-bye.